I will introduce Wendy Home. Wendy is an award-winning Canadian agrologist, resource economist, journalist, and author who's been working with Cuban agricultural cooperatives for 23 years. Throughout this period, she has taken hundreds of Canadian farmers, chefs, and students to Cuba in 7 separate delegations to learn more about Cuban sustainable farming practices. She has organized conferences in Cuba, and she has taught a University of British Columbia field studies course on sustainable agriculture from 2005 to 2016. She has also worked with St. Mary's University and Cuban partner, the National Association of Small Farmers, to develop a Cuban version of the Co-op Index, a diagnostic tool to support farmers' cooperatives as Cuba embarks on the road to a more cooperative and people-centered economy. So Wendy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much, Radhika and Arnold, for your work, and everybody else, Claudia and Claude and Keith, for putting this together. I'm speaking this morning from Fanny Bay on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish Nation. And my role in this session is more and more people have to begin paying attention to what's happening in Cuba. And I know that there are some people on this call who probably have a great deal of information about Cuba, but there are others who are sort of coming up the learning curve. So my role is to sort of give you a quick flight over where we are now in Cuba, how we got there, where we started, and the importance of today, of course, as the first shot over the bow of the Cuban Revolution. So I'm going to go through sort of the development since 1953 very quickly, a bit of history, and then talk a little bit about the situation today. So when there were the demonstrations in Havana a couple of weeks ago, there was I caught a CNN coverage of it, and they of course gave a lot of mic time to people in the streets talking about how they had nothing to eat and people were dying and there was no medicine and there was no food and down with the dictator, all the sorts of things that will guarantee the press will focus on you, and you'll hear more about the engagement of the United States in fomenting this dissent and funding the hip hop community to try and mobilize what appears to be a concern on the part of the Cuban people against the government. It's concerned with the frustration of the situation they're living in now. But anyway, it was CNN was covering this story, and standing on another street corner were some Cubans holding Cuban flags and standing in defense of Cuba and of their country. And so the reporter goes over and he says, puts the mic to them, and they say, well, this is really, it's the United States and the embargo and Trump that has caused the problems that Cuba is facing right now. And the reporter gives them a little bit of mic time, and then he turns around and he says to the camera, well, and so you can see there are a few people here who disagree with the majority of the protesters. He said, one man even kept repeating to me, I am Fidel, I am Fidel. And he laughed and he said, of course, Fidel has been dead since 2016. I'm so-and-so, such and such for CNN in Havana. And I thought, oh my God, this man understood nothing about what he was told. When Fidel passed in 2016 and his funeral cortege went through the countryside from Havana to Santiago de Cuba, where he rests next to Jose, Cubans lined the streets in tears. And the expression, yo soy Fidel, I am Fidel, became emblematic of the expression of the Cuban people that even although Fidel was gone, the principles of the revolution, the principles that Fidel fought for and created in this tiny socialist nation were within them. they kept them within their hearts, and so Fidel would never die. Yo soy Fidel, I am Fidel. And this is, of course, what this man was saying to this reporter who didn't get that at all. So today is July 26th. It is the day that the first attack on Moncada Barracks in 1953. Fidel named his movement Movimiento de 26 de Julio, the 26th of July movement. The colors are red and black, you'll notice. And it was, as you know, Fidel was convicted. He was imprisoned. He was sent to the, there was an amnesty in 1955. So Fidel moved off to Mexico and assembled a band of fighters to come back in 1956 on the Granma to launch what became the successful Cuban Revolution to overthrow the Batista government. And of course, Che was with Fidel at that time. The triumph of the revolution, January 1st, 1959, ushered in an entire new nation for Cuba. Cuba had been struggling for independence in the First and Second War of Independence in the late 1800s. They were under US protectorate and then basically puppet dictatorships. And so 1959 was the new dawn for the Cuban people. In 1960, it didn't take long, October 1960, the United States placed an embargo on Cuba, which has stood until this day. Cuba then turned to the former Soviet Union for support and entered into very important trade agreements with the Soviet Union to support the Cuban economy. 1961 was declared the year of literacy, and young students went off into the countryside to teach farmers and people how to read and write. And it was the first country in Latin America to be declared free of illiteracy. It is also the year that ANAP, the National Farmers Organization, was formed. I better watch my time here. And of course, ANAP is what has brought together the farmers into agricultural cooperatives and is the strength of Cuban agriculture. The Bay of Pigs was in 1961 an attempt to try and get back or to overthrow the Cuban or the new revolutionary government, and it was a abysmal failure, and the US prisoners were exchanged for baby food. The 1962 missile crisis, these are the sort of major things that Americans hear about when they hear about Cuba. Well, the missile crisis, there were missiles in Turkey aimed at Moscow. And so Russia put missiles in Cuba aimed at Washington as a standoff. And of course, both countries took their missiles away. It wasn't only Cuba who removed missiles, it was the United States who removed the missiles from Turkey. Moving on into the 1980s, Cuba had a higher standard of living than the United States based on human development indices. Everything in Cuba was sort of the golden age of Cuba in the 1980s. In the early 1990, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Cuba was thrown into a period of darkness. It was exacerbated by the collapse of sugar markets in the late 1990s, and Cuba went through what any other nation would have called a crisis. Cuba called it a special period, and the Cuban people lived through that special period. It was very hard. People our age lost 20, 30 pounds. It was a very difficult time. The Cuban economy had been based principally on sugar. And so with the collapse of the sugar markets, Cuba shut down half her sugar mills and had to look for other sources of income, the Soviet Union gone. And so tourism then became the support for the economy. In 1999, Cuba received the Right Livelihood Award from the Swedish Parliament for excellence in organic agriculture. In 2006, Cuba received the World Wildlife Fund Award for the only nation to achieve sustainability based on Human Development Index. In 2008, Raúl replaced Fidel when Fidel stepped down because of illness. And Raúl, so Fidel was the older brother and Fidel was the leader, follow me. Raúl, I think, in my opinion, he ran the army for many years. If you're not a good listener, that doesn't work well. So he was a listener and he had a different approach than Fidel. Fidel was follow me and Raúl was tell me what the problems are. So Raúl's and the Cuban government, of course, went out to the Cuban people and said, we need to renovate socialism to work with the new global economy. How do we do this? How do we make the policy changes that are necessary for Cuba? What are the things that you want to see? What are the problems? What are your complaints? I want to know everything that you feel is wrong or want changed in your community, at your local bodega, in your schools, in your life. And the Cuban people went, really, really, really? You want to know all the problems? Okay, here are the problems. And so tons through their CVRs, through their mass organizations, Cubans put on the desk of the Cuban government all the things that they wish to see changed. And Los Lineamientos was then drafted and sent back to the people. These were the policy guidelines for the new Cuban economy and society. And people again had the opportunity to look and talk and pick over these and comment and send their comments back to the government. This is, as a policy economist, to me, this is an unprecedented process on a policy level that I think is a hugely admirable one, and I have never seen it anyplace else, that level of consultation. So Los Lineamientos were implemented in 2011. It opened up brand new opportunities for cooperatives. It opened up brand new opportunities for cuenta propistas. And the Cuban economy, I mean, the difference was very evident for those of us who go to Cuba a lot. There were all sorts of new enterprises and things were going very, very well. In 2016, Obama visits Cuba, and of course in 2016 as well, sadly, Fidel passed away. The second big problem, of course, was Trump. In 2017, Trump comes in, and as Radhika mentioned, the restrictions, I mean, Title III of the Helms-Burton Act was enacted, which gave extraterritorial jurisdiction, the right of anybody who felt aggrieved to sue companies who were doing business in Cuba. There was a ban on all cruise ships. There was a ban on commercial airlines. There was a ban placed on charter flights. There was a discontinuation of the people-to-people program. There was a blockading of ships trying to sell oil to Cuba. There was banks that were sanctioned, international banks sanctioned for anybody who was going to do any commercial business with Cuba. They Trump stopped remittances from the US, which was a $3.5 billion hit to the Cuban economy. They pushed countries who were using the services of Cuban doctors to stop using the services of Cuban doctors. Brazil, for example, was one that cut $6.3 billion off the inputs for the Cuban government. And with all of these sanctions in place, more and more and more and more and more, then comes COVID. And COVID crashes the Cuban economy built on tourism. Like the special period, it is worse because in the special period, mostly everyone was still working for the state. Now, people had left, started their own businesses, cuenta propistas. Many people were in small private enterprise, and so they were no longer employed by the state. They were completely out of work and are out of work right now. The frustration in Cuba, I speak to my friends on a weekly basis, is very high, but the frustration is with the embargo, the Trump sanctions, and COVID. Those are the things that are killing the Cuban economy right now, or putting it under very great pressure. So there's going to be a lot more spoken or discussed with you with the other speakers on digging deeper into these areas. But basically, Cuba is a leader in sustainable agriculture. It is doing important work in cooperatives. somebody said to me, well, that's a bit of an experiment, isn't it, socialism? And I said, well, actually, capitalism is the experiment. And capitalism is, you know, bleeding on the global floor right now. We've seen the problems with capitalism, and capitalism is a failed system. We need the cooperatives of Cuba. We need the approach of socialism. We need the people-centered economy. Socialism fears, capitalism fears socialism, so it gaslights it and calls it communism, trying to bring up the fear of people. And I think there was a House Appropriations Bill, 20 million to democratize Cuba. I want to close with a quote that I heard, or that was on the news recently. Miami Republican Mayor Francis Suarez talks about the false promise of socialism. The truth of the matter is, it's never worked and never going to work, and the United States has to start intervening and finding a way, whether it's through humanitarian aid, military intervention, whatever means necessary, to protect the sovereignty of the Cuban people and the sovereignty of the United States in this hemisphere. I think that's shocking, and it is exactly what is underpinning all of the aggression that you're seeing towards Cuba today. We need to stand up for Cuba. At the end of this webinar, you'll have a couple of links of very important things that you can take 5 minutes and do that will add to the voice that is speaking up for our friend Cuba. Thank you.